Alrighty. Hello, and welcome to Cannabis first LinkedIn Live event, the first of many, I might add. To those of you joining us live, thank you very much for being here with us. And for those of you who are going to tune into the recording at a later time, also a big thank you to you. We hope you enjoy it, and we hope that you perhaps leave today's session having learned something new. Cannabis aims to combat the bottlenecks of the medical cannabis industry using the power of education and through the training of healthcare professionals on the effective use of cannabinoid medicines. In doing so, increasing access to medical cannabis for patients worldwide. If you haven't already, head over to the Cannabis LinkedIn page and smash up that follow button. Today we will be discussing the role of the endocannabinoid system in the GI tract. Joining me on today's stream are my friends and colleagues, Viola Brugnatelli, co-founder of Cannabis Scienza, as well as today's subject matter expert, Fabio Turco, CSO at Cannabis Scienza and PhD Neurogastrocannabinology. Guys, take it away.
Thank you, Bijan. Thank you so much. And thank you for participating in this first little event to start to broadcast a little bit of what we've been working on in these years. And we thought it was very good to just start from actually our topic of expertise. So actually with Fabio, we have been working on this interaction that now is getting more and more attention, which is the interaction of the gut-brain axis. We like to call it neurogastrocannabinology. Okay, and that was weird. We like to call it neurogastrocannabinology. We'll today, of course, this is a topic we touched actually in different lectures, and it could take a very long time and goes in a lot of depth. Also because with some of you probably more aware about the extensive, how massive and incredible it is, the endocannabinoid. You all know that we could stay here for a while, but what we tried to do for today was we will attempt half an hour, and that's why we have Bijan actually helping us out to be as synthetic as possible, but to go through in half an hour in what's the journey actually of the food through our organs, so mouth to intestine, and the interaction of the different organs of the GI tract with the endocannabinoid system, and how the endocannabinoid system is regulating our organs. So both from a physiological point of view, but then of course also this is a basis to understand better how we can tackle pathology with components, with compounds that can modulate the endocannabinoid system. And to do this, I couldn't be more fortunate actually to have Fabio, that is our expert on the topic, and to help him out in this, I'll also add to the stream a little slide presentation. So thank you, Fabio. I'll just put my mic off, but I'll be here for a little interaction.
Okay. Thank you, Viola. Thank you, Bijan. So let's start talking about the role of the endocannabinoid system in the GI tract. Let's start saying that its role it is similar to the role that it exerts in the whole human body. That is to maintain the homeostasis by keeping the chemical, physical, and biological components in equilibrium. Constituents of the endocannabinoid system have been found throughout the gastroenterologic tract. The first report about their presence dates back in 1995, when a group of Israeli scientists led by Raphael Meshulam isolated the endocannabinoid 2-arachidonyl glycerol, or 2-AG, in the gut of dogs. After that discovery, almost all the components of the GI have been found in the gastrointestinal tract, also in human. Indeed, here we can have, for example, the CB1 receptor expressed mainly on the epithelial and endocrine cells, and also on neuronal cells, especially those of the enteric nervous system. Also, the CB2 receptor can be found in the enteric nervous system, but is expressed mainly on the surface of immune cells of the GI tract. We have also members of the TRP family, members of the GPR family, the PPRs, and the adenosine A2A receptors and other minor cannabinoid receptors. Then we can find, of course, endocannabinoid such as anandamide and 2-AG and others. We have also endocannabinoids-like molecules such as palmitoyl ethanolamide and oletoyl ethanolamide. We have all the enzymes responsible for the metabolism of endocannabinoids, such as fatty acid amide hydrolase and the monoacylglycerol lipase. Here, all these constituent receptor, enzymes, and endogenous mediator act together to ensure that the gastrointestinal tract exerts its function. Now, because the main function of the GI tract is to digest food, tracing the route of food throughout the GI tract can be a good way to better understand the role that the cannabinoid system exerts in the various organs of the GI tract. So we can start from the mouth. Here, in the salivary fluids, various studies have demonstrated the presence of endocannabinoids and endocannabinoids-like molecules. These studies also correlated the fasting levels of this endocannabinoid with the BMI, with the waist circumference, and with the fasting insulin. Moreover, other studies correlate endocannabinoid levels with obesity. In the mouth, we can also find the CB1 receptor expressed mainly on the salivary glands. Here, CB1 activation decreases salivation, and this may be the mechanism underlying the dry mouth experienced by most of cannabis and medical cannabis users. But maybe in the field of endocannabinoid in the mouth, Viola can say something more.
Sure. This actually has been the topic of a poster that we just recently presented as Cannabiscientia at the conference just been on in Basel, the new ICM SCCCM conference. And we wanted to review a little bit of the knowledge, the literature that we have about oral cavity, dentistry, dental medicine, and cannabis for two main reasons. On one hand, there is now an increase of the population that either for medical reasons or for just regulations that allow for recreational use, not that before people weren't using it, but it's just more accessible. So more and more people, and I've been reading this as well, like just yesterday, actually, on an article on High Times on how many people are actually going to the dentist office that are high or they just consumed cannabis. And this has implication for a dentist. So we needed to compile a little bit of guidelines, if you will, for dentists. For example, one of the common issues they might have is how do I get informed consent with someone who is high? So even on that, for example, there is like very easy mini mental that are suggested to be used so that the dentist knows that actually can proceed with the procedure or not. On the other hand, and this is, I think, one of the topics that is very little talked about, but as you just suggested, there is this important interaction between of course, CB1 present on the tongue, that we know about this because all of the suckling that we do as mammals actually is thanks to the CB1 receptors present on the tongue. So it's this interaction between the endocannabinoids in the milk and the CB1 present on the tongue that actually allow newborns to be able to do the suckling, the suckling feeding, the feeding through suckling. But at the same time, this is one of the side effects that are really underspoken about cannabis, because it leads to xerostomia, so dry mouth. And with dry mouth, a lot of, basically there is an environment that is very ready for a lot of issues, different issues, like an increase of cavities, an increase of periodontal disease, and so on. So, and this is not just due to the smoking itself as a method of consumption, because this has been shown to exist, like there are oral lesions that can come out as well with the use of Sativex, so of compounds that we administer through an oral mucosal way. So it is actually a matter of the active ingredients that there are in the cannabis preparations. However, on the other hand, we were also interested to see whether utilizing some of the compounds with, for example, antimicrobial activity, with a good use in perioperative pain, with a possibility of use, for example, in dental anxiety, could actually serve in the dentist's office. And there are actually some applications, especially in disorders like oral mucositis or temporomandibular pain, or burning mouth syndrome, in which there is a strong interaction as well with stress factors that actually cannabinoids seems to be pretty helpful. And on the other hand, we were interested as well to see, because now there is quite a few companies, not just from the cannabis space, but also from like the oral B of the situation, like the dental space, that went in the direction of trying to see whether compounds like cannabidiol or cannabigerol can actually be administered, for example, through toothpaste or mouthwashes, or even in a trial on TMD, actually they've been using successfully patches of CBD on the jawbone. So different method of administration that could actually help rescuing some of the issues that relate to the mouth. So yeah. Sorry to take too much space, but I find it a very interesting topic on how, and this I think can relate to a lot of conversation about cannabis or cannabinoids in general, how sometimes it's all a matter of understanding really what we need to use, and depending on what we're using and how we're using it, we could create an issue or perhaps even rescuing an issue. Now, of course, we didn't even mention this, and perhaps this is going to be a topic for another live, but the first step into inserting a food into our mouth is the willingness of doing so, so the appetite. And there, of course, we could talk another 3 hours on actually how the endocannabinoid system relates to that. But let's follow the route of food. And of course, after the mouth, there is clearly the esophagus. So it's your topic. I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, thank you, Viola. It's really a very interesting topic, and how I'm sure that we will talk about this also in the following events. But now, in the esophagus, we have also a massive presence of the endocannabinoid system. Here, the main role is exerted by the CB1 receptor. By activating CB1 receptor, we can decrease the spontaneous swallows in human, and this has been seen also in animal studies. But the main effect is on the transient lower esophageal sphincter relaxation. Indeed, CB1 decrease esophageal sphincter relaxation, and this can be an useful mechanism in case of gastroesophageal reflux. Indeed, for example, a study published in 2009 have shown that by giving 10 or 20 milligram of THC to healthy volunteer, there is a decreased rate of sphincter relaxation and a decreased number of gastroesophageal reflux episodes. This is a very interesting role of the THC, but in the same studies, researchers noted that by activating the central CB1 receptor, this caused nausea and vomiting, and this, together with the psychotropic effect of THC, limit its therapeutic use. Maybe in this case, selective targeting of peripheral CB1 receptor would be a better option in case of gastroesophageal reflux. So, after the esophagus, the food goes into the stomach, and also here there is a massive presence of the endocannabinoid system into the gastric mucosa. Stimulation of the endocannabinoid system, especially of the CB1 receptor, induces gastric anti-secretory activity that can be useful in case of ulcer, and this can be done by using agonist or also by inhibiting the fatty acid amide hydrolase. And in this way, we increase the level of anandamide that exerts the same effect of agonist on CB1 receptor. Another interesting effect is that CB1 activation slows gastric empty, and this can be useful in case of gastric gastroparesis. That is a pathology in which there is a partial paralysis of the stomach. In this case, by antagonizing the effect of the CB1 activation, we can speed up gastric emptying. Then we go in the gut, and in the gut, all the members of the endocannabinoid system are expressed. We have CB1 receptor, CB2, TRPV1, and other receptor endocannabinoids, and all the enzymes responsible of endocannabinoids metabolism. The main role here exerted by the endocannabinoid system is to control intestinal motility, permeability, inflammation, and visceral pain. This role is exerted mainly by CB1 receptor. Indeed, how we can see, CB1 receptor expressed, for example, on neurons of the mesenteric plexus, when activated, decrease the release of acetylcholine, and this is correlated with a reduced intestinal motility. Moreover, CB1 stimulation decrease intestinal secretion, and this effect can be exploited in case of diarrhea. It induces also a reduction in intestinal inflammation and in visceral pain. This anti-nociceptive effect can also be exerted by stimulating the TRPV1 receptor expressed on the surface of the capsaicin-like neurons. Moreover, a lot of studies have demonstrated, especially in vitro and in vivo studies, that CB1 activation decreases tumor cell growth in the gut. A very important role is also exerted by the CB2 receptor, and this is very important in case of an inflamed gut. Indeed, for example, in case of inflammation, by using CB2 agonist, we can decrease the release of inflammatory mediators from immune cells in the gut, and this anti-inflammatory effect is correlated to a decreased intestinal motility, permeability, and also to a decrease in visceral pain induced by inflammation. So selective targeting CB2 receptor can be a good way to control intestinal inflammation. All these effects on motility, permeability, and visceral pain can be very useful in case of intestinal pathologies such as inflammatory bowel disease or irritable bowel disease. For example, in case of IBD, really a lot of preclinical studies have demonstrated an anti-inflammatory and protective effect in case of induced colitis. But here, when it comes to human studies, the results are not so very clear. Indeed, we can see that the very few clinical studies that have been carried out, especially in Israel by the group of Natali, show that there is an improvement in symptoms in patients with IBD, especially with Crohn's disease. Indeed, this patient experiences less pain, fewer episodes of diarrhea, and also an improvement in their mood. But all these clinical studies fail to meet their primary endpoint, that is the remission of the disease. So results are not conclusive, and moreover, in all these studies, patients relapse after stopping medical cannabis use. Even if the clinical studies don't have definitive result, it has been a lot of surveys demonstrated that almost from 10 to 15% of patients still use medical cannabis to relieve their symptoms in case of IBD. Same things for the IBS syndrome, but also in this case, maybe Viola, you can tell us more.
Sure. A couple of years ago, I think we published this paper in which we challenged a bit the clinical way of addressing IBS. First of all, we went on to exploring as clearly, as we look at the physiology of not only the GI tract, but also, as we said, these pathologies. When we talk about IBS, there is a very strong mind, so neuro component as well. And so we went first at looking at, for example, the changes that there are at the receptorial level, and then at the level of serum of endocannabinoid presence. For example, of the difference between CB1 and TRPV1 expression following childhood stress, for example, and how that it's related to a decrease of CB1 expression and an increase of TRPV1, which often results in many of the symptoms that are experienced by IBS sufferers. So in a sense, we challenge. No, we don't just talk about cannabis. Actually, in this paper, what we talk about is trying to start to think about IBS as something that we can tackle, even at first line, with modulators of the endocannabinoid system. So when we look at the endocannabinoid system, actually, it's using the plant, the exogenous cannabinoids is not necessarily clearly one of the only ways that we have to tackle the endocannabinoid system. It's interesting, of course, to look at some molecules of cannabis, like, for example, CBD, for its activity on fatty acid amide hydrolase, because as we know, if a CBD inhibits FA, then of course we're going to have higher levels of anandamide, which in terms can actually go and help some of the neuro, so more like mood issues that we see. But the changes that we witness are actually more that really take the whole endocannabinoidome. So we didn't restrict just to some of the classic cannabinoids. And in this sense, you mentioned at the beginning, for example, the similar endocannabinoid palmitoylethanolamide, and on there was quite consistent from one hand how patients, for example, suffering from IBS actually have dysregulated levels of several cannabinoids, but especially of PEA, which at a very interesting level of specificity, even defining what type of IBS actually they are, depending on the type of dysregulation on PIA. And then at the same time, there's been, because PIA in many countries is a nutraceutic, can be sold without prescription. So it's a way easier compound to investigate than something like THC. So actually on there, we even have a bit of data coming from clinical trials that actually was very, very promising on not only managing some of the issues of IBS, but actually in some instances potentially even going to rescue, because the idea with the study of the endocannabinoid system is in the pathologies in which there is a clear dysregulation. The big question is, can we do something on this physiological system to arrive to a sort of rescue? So one thing, I see vision, so it means we're very close to the end. But one of the things I wanted to just close with is just saying this. One of, for example, of the lifestyle modification that we proposed, we just didn't talk just about pharmacological compounds. We believe that also, we believe based on literature, scientific literature, but lifestyle modification, simply like exercise, but even meditation slash hypnosis, depends from which part of the world you're watching. One of the two is probably just comes to your ear better. Actually can have a massive role in pathologies that we still call, the old school still call as a psychosomatic. So yeah, I just wanted to close by saying that perhaps is a little restrictive as an industry to look at the interaction of the endocannabinoid system merely done by a plant. Then I have no doubts whatsoever that we're still not even tapping the potential of the plant, because as we know, the plant, it's full of incredible compounds that we still haven't tackled. But when we look at the endocannabinoidome, there is so much more that we can do than just looking at the plant, especially in the moment, like in this paper, we were pretty challenging. You know, we're saying tackle this as first line. It's pretty tough to say to a medical doctor, but especially for the doctors that are a little, with a little bit of issues into prescribing cannabis. I think it's still very important that looking at the endocannabinoid system and seeing all the other things that actually I can be doing on this physiologic system without even having to touch cannabis. So I see vision here, means that we're now at the end of our little session. I don't know if Fabio had perhaps a closing slide.
Oh, yeah, I would like also to talk about the role of
Yes,
the
he had a
interaction
closing slide
between
that is tough microbiota.
But yeah, on the microbiota, we can just say that by modulating the microbiota, we can modulate the endocannabinoid tone in the gut. And then conversely, by modifying the endocannabinoid tone in the gut, we can change the microbiota composition. All this effect and all we talk about, especially in the gut, reminds me, and this is my last my conclusion, remind me the words of the ancient Greek philosopher and physician Hippocrates, who used to say that all the diseases start from the gut. This is all.
And I think it's worth mentioning, since it's a work I really, really admire that you published a few years ago. Actually, I think this shows it very well on how the depletion of the microbiota has an incredible direct effect on our mood, on our states, and how we can potentially also do the rescue of a depressive state with a healthy gut. And in this, the endocannabinoid system for sure has a huge role. So clearly we just scratched the surface with this half an hour, but hopefully it was enticing enough to go and explore more this topic. We did touch this topic quite a lot actually on a clinical handbook we are putting together for physicians. And if you follow this page on LinkedIn, you'll definitely see here and there as calling out links on this handbook. So you can definitely check that out if you want to know more on the topic, and of course on the related topic, because then there is the application in pathologies of what we're saying.
Guys, thank you. That was absolutely awesome. And I think our audience probably agrees we will have to have another session on this topic. I also think that we will definitely need a session on the role of cannabinoids in dental medicine, because I think there's a lot to discuss there. We do have a question today. I'm just going to pop it up on the screen here. And the question is, what are the ramifications of not breastfeeding as it pertains to the endocannabinoid system? Is anything known? AEA in breast milk or CB1R on the tongue?
I'm not sure I actually get the question, but one thing I'm sure that actually the compound, the endocannabinoid that is most present is 2-AG, actually in the breast milk. And as for ramification of not breastfeeding, I'm not super sure if the person is still there and wants to add on, or write me and we can continue the conversation for sure.
Yeah, we can say that how you say the 2-AG is present on breast milk, and this is a factor that induces the baby to go to the mammals and to receive the milk. So this is very relevant.
So if the audience member that posted the question is still with us, please feel free to add another follow-up. Otherwise, another huge thank you to all of you that joined us today. We'd love to hear from you. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, what you want to hear about next. And you can find all of us on LinkedIn. You can also, of course, find the Cannabis Scienza LinkedIn page. Don't forget to give us a follow to stay up to date with what we have coming up. And yes, thank you to all of you for joining us. And we will see
And
you
see
very
you in the
soon.
next live. Yes, and see you in the next live.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you, guys. Ciao.
Bye. Ciao.